What's up, and welcome to the video. So this is going to be fun. We're going to talk about the Pixel 6 Pro. This is the latest flagship smartphone from Google that they actually made to compete with the big dogs this year. So this phone is going to compete with your iPhones and your Samsung Galaxies, your post $1,000 smartphones. And it's been a while since we've seen flagships from Google. How long has it been? Do you consider the Pixel 4 a flagship phone? No. That's another video for another day. But either way, it's been a long time since we've seen Google drop a flagship phone, and I've really enjoyed using the Pixel 6 Pro over the past couple of weeks. And one of my favorite parts about it is actually its competitive price point. This phone starts at $900, which definitely undercuts a little bit of the competition. So let's do this. Let's talk Pixel 6 Pro. Okay, so let's start with the design of the phone because, and I mentioned this in our first video over the Pixel 6 Pro, it is incredibly polarizing, and the phone has been out for a while now, so I'm guessing you're at a point now where you either really love it or you really hate it. I'm gonna be honest with you, it has actually grown on me. I like this design a lot. You've got Gorilla Glass Victus on the front for the display, and I'm pretty sure you've got Gorilla Glass 6 on the back, but this design is really unique. And I'm hoping that Google keeps it going forward because I feel like Google was trying to establish a uniquely Pixel type design. Like you can look at the back of this phone and you'll know right away that's an iPhone. So I think Google is trying to go for something like you can look at the back of this phone and you'll know that that is a Pixel phone. The one thing is I'm hoping Google actually continues this design moving forward. There have been a lot of design changes between the first Pixel, Pixel 2, Pixel 3, Pixel 4, Pixel 5, they've all looked very, very different. I'm hoping Google sticks with this so the Pixel lineup as a whole starts to gain some sort of design language that is unique to itself. And one cool thing about this little visor here is that if you like to put your phone down on a desk and use it, you're not actually going to get any rocking, which is going to be nice. Flipping things over to the front of the phone, you will find a 6.7-inch 1440p curved display with a variable refresh rate, anywhere from 10 Hz to 120 Hz, depending on the content on your display. Now, this isn't the first time we've seen a display like this. We've seen it on the new iPhone, and we also saw it earlier in the year with the Galaxy S21 Ultra, and the display on the Pixel 6 Pro is just as awesome as those previous two phones that I mentioned. I love it, especially the 120 Hertz refresh rate. The display itself, from a quality standpoint, is great. I love how bright and saturated and vivid all the colors look. It's just a really, really good display. There are a couple of things I would change about it. I would say these probably fall more into the nitpicking category, but either way, I'm not too big of a fan of the fact that the display curves. I get it. When you're looking at the display head on, it looks incredible. And obviously having a slight curve to the display means slightly smaller bezels all around, but accidental touches are still a thing here or there. And I don't know about you, but I'm still probably just one of the very few people that still use screen protectors on my phone. You use a screen protector, right? Yeah, okay, so I use a screen protector on my phones, my iPhone included, and a lot of times I also don't use a case, which means that on a phone like the Pixel, the back of the phone is exposed, which I'm okay with, but the front of the phone is also exposed too. And when you have those curves around the edges, it's hard to find a tempered glass screen protector for it. I have tried a couple of those that kind of curve with the display, but it ends up just looking really wonky and not too attractive. So for me personally, I'd prefer just flat edges and small bezels around the edge, but that's just my personal choice. And the other thing that I would change is the speed of the built-in fingerprint sensor. I have no problem with the fact that the sensor is actually in the display, and it's an optical one, so it's like what we've seen on a lot of other OnePlus flagship phones, but it's like just slow enough to where you kind of feel like it hiccups while it's trying to authenticate. Like it's like a good half second that you have to rest your thumb on the fingerprint sensor. Maybe I've just been spoiled by the ultrasonic sensor that I have on the S21 Ultra, but either way, I feel like this is slower than it probably should be. I don't really know if it's a software thing or that's just something unique to the specific optical sensor they used, but hopefully it's something that can be fixed in a future software update. Now, the star of the show here, and well, there are actually a lot of awesome things going on with this year's Pixel, but the headliner is going to be the Google Tensor Chip. Now, this is a custom-built chip that is essentially running the show alongside Android 12. And Tensor is going to enable Google to take things like machine learning, artificial intelligence, computational photography to the next level whenever it comes to their Pixel smartphones. Now, I have seen some articles on the internet talking about how Tensor doesn't really benchmark well. I think I actually saw one article that said Tensor benchmarks worse than Apple's A12. But I think just looking at Tensor from a benchmark perspective is definitely the wrong way to go about it. So if you're looking at raw benchmark numbers, it is better than the 765G we saw on the Pixel 5 last year, and it's just short of the Snapdragon 888 that we see driving a lot of 2021 flagship Android phones. But performance on a day-to-day perspective is actually really, really good. The Pixel 6 Pro has been able to handle anything I've been able to throw at it from a performance standpoint, and it's still driving that 120 hertz display at the same time. So I'm not gonna look at Tensor from just benchmark numbers because I've been really, really happy with the performance on the Pixel, and Android 12 has been great too. I really enjoy the new Material U design we've got going on here. It just makes the phone feel really cohesive. It's super cool to be able to just change your wallpaper and see smart widgets and elements of the UI and system apps all kind of change and tailor to the colors that you want to create. It just leads to a really, really unique smartphone experience. So Tensor is actually really cool, and it's enabling other smart camera features that we're going to get here to in a second. So I know this is Google's first attempt at making a smartphone chip, but I'm really, really excited to see what the future holds because Tensor on a first-gen product is really looking promising already. Another aspect where I feel Tensor definitely had a noticeable impact was in the battery life. So I had mentioned in our review over the 13 Pro Max that phone was like a 2-day phone in terms of like I don't even have to charge it overnight. I can use it for basically a day, leave it overnight, and then use it a little bit more the next day. I'm able to do the same exact thing with the Pixel 6 Pro. Now, granted, there is a huge battery in this phone. This phone it's like 5,003. I think it's just like, it's literally just some really small number over 5,000. So we're gonna go with just a 5,000 milliamp hour battery here. And this phone can last me well through one day of, I would say, moderate to relatively heavy usage. And I'm able to take it into the next day and use it as well. I also found that standby time is really, really nice on the Pixel 6 Pro. Like I'm able to leave this on my desk overnight for like a full 8 hours and it only drops like 2 to 3% over the course of those 8 hours. So for me, the battery life on the Pixel 6 Pro has been really, really good. I only have to charge this thing once every like day and a half, and that's with having it in my pocket pretty consistently. So from a battery life perspective and a performance perspective, I think Tensor is doing a really, really good job here. So when you think Google Pixel, you're probably thinking of one of two things, the Google Assistant, or you're thinking of the cameras. And it is that time of the review. We're going to talk about this new camera array that we have because for the first time in a long time, we actually have some new camera hardware. So when the Pixels first dropped, their cameras were like revolutionary. Not from a hardware perspective, but they were only using a single lens. It was more of Google's computational photography that just took the pictures to a whole new level. And quite honestly, if I remember correctly, I'm pretty sure Google has used like the same 12 megapixel sensor since like the original Pixel 2. Like 2, 3, 4, and 5 all used the same 12 megapixel sensor, I think. If I'm wrong, let me know in the comments, but I'm pretty sure that's the case. Now with the Pixel 6, we do have new hardware because I mean, hey, we're in 2021, companies that make other phones make amazing cameras as well, so Google definitely had to bump it up in the hardware department. We have a 50 megapixel wide angle, although there's some pixel binning going on here, so your photos are actually gonna be at 12.5 megapixel resolution, a 12 megapixel ultra wide angle, and a 48 megapixel telephoto with 4 times optical zoom. And I gotta say, I mean, I was already going into the Pixel 6 Pro with great expectations for the camera, and it definitely lived up to those expectations. The photos that you get are going to be great, and I'm not going to say that the Pixel is like leaps and bounds ahead of phones like the S21 Ultra or the iPhone 13 Pro Max, but it's definitely a camera system that is more so running alongside the pack as opposed to leading the pack now. And something really cool that I've enjoyed is some of the AI smarts that Google is able to add to the camera now, thanks to Google Tensor, mainly in the form of Magic Eraser. There is one other feature called Motion Blur, and I do have an example as well for Motion Blur, but Magic Eraser has been super dope. So let's say you take a photo and, I don't know, you have like a small random object or you have like a photo bomber or two inside of your photo. Magic Eraser allows you to go in and right on your phone essentially try to crop them out of the picture, and then Google uses AI to try to fill in the background to make the photo look as natural as possible when those pieces are removed from the photo. And I find that in certain situations it works really well. Like if you were to take a photo of, let's say, a street and you have a random fire hydrant, I did this on purpose, but let's say you have a random fire hydrant in front of your shot, you can kind of crop out that fire hydrant like magic, and Google will use artificial intelligence to fill in, random pieces of grass or the missing part of the street. So I found that in situations that the background is easy to fill, let's say like a sky or a patch of grass, the phone does really well. It's only whenever you try to do things like remove an entire Honda Accord from the middle of the street that Google tries to overcompensate, and you end up getting some watercolor looking vibes once that object is actually removed. But overall, to have a tool like Magic Eraser on a smartphone so you can make those kind of pocket-sized edits for a photo, I mean, that's so clutch, and that's something that you're not really finding on other smartphones. So that's super dope. And going back to Motion Blur, this will essentially take a moving part of a photo, like let's say a water fountain, or if you live somewhere like New York and you're riding the subway, or maybe you're adventurous and you go out to carnivals and there's a Ferris wheel behind you. You can essentially take a photo of something that's moving in the background and add a really nice artistic blur to it, and it just takes your photo to the next level. So camera itself produces great photos. What we're seeing in terms of Google elevating certain features thanks to AI and computational photography with Google Tensor is next level, and I'm really excited to see how this grows with future software updates. So all in all, I gotta say, I have really enjoyed using the Pixel 6 Pro, and I mentioned at the beginning of the video that it has a starting price tag of $899, and that is for 128 gigs of storage and 12 gigs of RAM. And it also has those other small flagship features that are a little underrated, but like obviously you expect them to be there, right? So it's got the IP68 water and dust resistance, and whenever I say an underrated feature, I'm mainly talking about this. I don't know if you'll be able to hear it on the mic, but those are some tactile and clicky buttons, which is, I mean, that's probably one of the most underrated things you'll ever find on a smartphone. But either way, the 6 Pro has a lot of great things going for it, and it undercuts a lot of the competition coming in at $899, and you can save even more if you have something to trade in towards the Pixel 6 Pro. So $899 gets you everything I've mentioned in this video with the Tensor chip, 12 gigs of RAM, and 128 gigs of base storage, which is perfect for someone like me, especially if you're like me and you use a lot of cloud-based storage solutions for things like your photos and videos. But if you do need more internal storage, the 6 Pro does have the option for 256 and 512. But either way, I mean, I am definitely really impressed by the 6 Pro. This is most definitely a phone that can compete with the best from companies like Apple and Samsung, and it's actually even cheaper than the OnePlus 9 Pro whenever that phone launched as well. So phones like the 13 Pro Max start at $1,099. Phones like the S21 Ultra, when they launched, were well over the $1,000 or $1,100 mark. And even the OnePlus 9 Pro, when it launched back in March, was $969. This phone undercuts all of them at $899. And I know I've said $899 like a million times in this outro, but it just goes to show just how competitive this price point actually is, especially if you have a phone to trade in. So I think the hardest part about getting the Pixel 6 Pro is actually acquiring the Pixel 6 Pro. I know a lot of people have had challenges getting one, but if you're interested, hopefully you can actually get your hands on it because it is an awesome smartphone. So I think Google did a great job here. And not to give away too much, but the Pixel 6 is an even better deal than this phone. So if you haven't already, make sure you subscribe because our review over the Pixel 6 is coming up next. So hit subscribe if you haven't, hit like, do me all those favors if you haven't already. And as always, I really appreciate you watching. Thank you so much. Stay safe, and I'll see you in the next video. Peace. You get my point. How long has it been since we've seen a Google flagship? Do you consider the Pixel 4 a flagship? That's a different video for another day, but it has been a long time since we've seen an actual flagship phone from Pixel. Let's redo that.